Hello everyone. It's great to be here today with Tom and Clara. I am Toman and I work as a design system lead at Productboard. And I would like to tell you more about crafting code-aligned UI kits today. I have a long passion for design systems, and before Productboard I was working on design systems in different companies, also on Orbit, an open source design system for travel. But let's talk about design systems, because that's why we are here today. Design systems are composed from several parts. There are design tokens, there are UI kit, there is a UI kit, there is component library, some guidelines, and documentation site. What I would like to focus on today, though, is this part of design system spectrum, and especially on design tokens, on UI kit and Figma, and connections between these things, and also how Figma connects to component library. So what will we learn today? I would like to tell you more about how component API choices affect usability. I would like to talk more about making changes and how not to break things when we are making these changes, and of course aligning Figma with code components. Let's start with component API. This is a very important thing in how we build UI kits. But what is a component API? The component API is the way each component can be controlled and configured. Don't confuse this with the Figma REST API or plugin API. This is something else. Let me give you an example. Component API, for example, in React, may look like this. This is a button. More specifically, it's a button primary. It has a size large, it is an icon, and a few more properties. And this is how developers control how the button will look like in code. In Figma, we have a few options how we can set up our component API. We have layers, and we have variant controls. Let me show it on an example of alert component. For our component, we have a layers panel that has layers like title, description, icon, it has actions, and this layers panel is visible to designers who are using the component. But there is also something that I call variant controls or variant knobs, which are present on the right side of the Figma UI. And this is how designers can control all the variants that may be or they want to have on their canvas. There is also like a preview in assets panel, which is very helpful for designers because it's also like a part of the API that basically components communicating to designers. There is one thing that I realized over past few years when I was building a UI kit, and that is designing API for components is that only I will be using is a completely different discipline than creating components that are understandable to people who will use our design system. Let me show you two approaches. One approach is where I optimize component API for me as a designer. Let's say I need 10 variants of one button with different colors. So I can build a component, I can define the component with all the states like hover, focus, disabled, but I won't pick any colors in the component definition. Instead, when I will be using the component in my designs, I can just select the icon and I can change the color directly. This is great because this is very simple for maintenance and it gives me some visual flexibility. However, it also expects that I need all the aspects of design language. It also needs some onboarding to how to work with components like this, and it requires more cognitive load for changing the component. There is a second approach that can be chosen for building a component that is optimized for others to use. The same button with 10 different variants. We can do the component definition where we define all the visual attributes of the component, and then designers will get control variant controls in the right panel, and they can just pick which color they want to have. This is also great because it's super clear what's supported for the component. It is very intuitive for designers to use it. It doesn't require a knowledge of visual language and a few more benefits. There are, of course, also cons, and the main one probably is that it's harder. So when I was thinking, like, what are some differences between like what UI kit maintainers knows or need and what UI kit consumers knows or need, I defined like a few aspects. It's about knowing all the components and variants in the system. Maintainers probably knows all of these, consumers very possibly know. The same applies to the inner structure of each component, how the layers are structured, how are the internal mechanics of each built component. Deep knowledge of visual language is another one. Not all UI kit consumers knows how visual language works for the product they are working. And last but not least, UI kit maintainers are very possibly more experienced with all the Figma quirks and hacks. But after some time, even UI kit maintainers are like start to forget some things. With the growing number of components in the design system, they won't know all the components, all the variants, and they will definitely don't know, like, for example, after 6 months, how they decide to build a component inside, like the inner structure of the component. So when we are designing API for components, there are a few questions we should ask, like, should it be flexible or constrained? Will consumers need to know details of product visual language? What is an API approach for our code components? Because it also can affect how we structure our components in Figma. And most importantly, will it be used only by me or also by others? Let me tell you about the situation at Productboard. We are quite a small company. We have 2 design systems designers today. I was one until August 2021. But there is 35 more people, weekly active editors, who are on our Figma plan. Which means that the ratio between people who maintain the UI kit and people who consume the UI kit is 1 to 18. And this ratio will definitely grow in the future because we are hiring more product designers, more writers, more product managers, and we won't have like 5 and so on, like system designers. So if we are able to save at least 10 seconds every time a consumer uses a component, it's for us more important to optimize our UI kit for usability rather than maintainability. So we ask a question, how might we create UI kits that designers will love using, that won't break with future changes, and that will be aligned with code? Let's focus on the first one. One of the most important things I practice is having each distinctive variant of component as a separate component. What does it mean in practice? For example, you can choose an API of a button where you have a type as a variant. That means that designers will see only the main button in the assets panel when they are searching for a button, and then when they place the button on the canvas, they can select its type. Or, which I believe is way better way to do things, is to split all the button types, all the visual distinctive button types into several separate components. So when designers are searching for button, they will get previews of all these buttons directly from the panel, which will save a few clicks every time they use a button. So when to consider splitting variants into more components, like I already mentioned the one that some common variants have visual distinctive types or different use cases. There's a second one that some properties are not applicable to all component variants. Let's say that one of the button types has only 2 sizes instead of 3 sizes. We don't need to maintain all these sizes for all the buttons. We can split it into 2 separate components, and we can get lower amount of variants to maintain. Another helpful thing may be using analytics in Figma to figure which components or which variants are more commonly used by consumers, and if there are like strong candidates, it's a good thing to split them into two components as well. And one last thing, which is I think very important, is that when there is a variant that causes a large number of permutations, for example, like we would get with hundreds of different variants, it's a good thing to split it into several components, because not just that the UI kit will, or the component will become more maintainable, it will also lower the size of the library for consumers. Another tip that is super helpful is setting the most frequent variant as default. It's quite easy to do. Basically, Figma works the way that if you place a component or variant of the component into the left top corner, it will not just be a preview of the component, it will also be the default option. And again, using Figma Analytics can help here to identify which component is the most common. For example, this tooltip, like if there is 80% of use cases is using tooltip with a bottom arrow, it's a good thing to have it as a default variant, because designers don't need to change it every time they use the component. One tip that I learned recently is providing common presets for complex components. There is a great example of table component. Figma doesn't support tables well, at least not yet. And what we provide in our UI kit usually is a table cell in different variations, with text, with link, header, with checkbox, and so on. But what we also provide as part of our UI kit is that we provide columns of each of these table cell types, which means that when designers need to assemble the table, they can just pick the columns they want to, and they can resize them, they can put them into auto layout box, they can reshuffle them. But the point is they are way more faster with working with with tables, with columns prepared. Let's go to the second point. How might we create UI kits that won't break with future changes? What I mean by future changes, we all know this dialogue, and we all know that this dialogue is sometimes scary. And I asked a lot of designers about how they feel about this, and a lot of them told me that they just don't update the library because they are afraid that their designs and prototypes will break with the update. There's a great meme from Joey about this. I think we all can relate to that. What can be breaking changes in Figma? One very nasty breaking change is resetting overrides. Imagine that you have a prototype, you have your content there, you are prepared to have a usable session tomorrow, then you will hit an update button in Figma, and all your content in prototype will get resetted into the default variants. This will probably cause that you as a designer won't hit the update again, and you will be quite angry on the UI kit, because this shouldn't happen, right? There is also a breaking change that is called visual breaking change. This is not resetting the content, but and this one is super small one, but notice the small toggle on the left before the update, and when you hit update it, a toggle changed its size in the UI kit, and it broke visually your designs. There is one more practice, a common practice that is happening when people are, for example, deprecating components, and it's putting overlays over these components. But I consider this also as a visual breaking change, because again, imagine the scenario that you are supposed to have usable session tomorrow. You will update your prototypes, and you will get a lot of overlays with deprecated components, forcing you into replacing them by non-deprecated versions. I wouldn't recommend doing overlays. It's a short story here. Let's do some demos. I would like to show you 3 demos. I would like to show you how I try to prevent breaking changes. A few more. I would like to say more things about base components and show what they are, and I would like to show you how we organize our canvas for better maintainability. Let's start with testing changes and preventing breaking changes. So let's say that we have this button component with all its variants, with some sizes. We also have all these test scenarios of this component. These are the default state without any overrides, and these are the label and icon overrides. As you can see, there is a custom label, there is a custom icon, and this is super helpful because this helps me to test if the component will break or not. So we have a list of things that we would like to do. So as you can see, I did an image snapshots of all these states before, so I don't need to remember what was there before I made any changes, and I can compare it after that. I also want to change, for example, the label style for the small variant of button to let's say 13 pixels semi-bold. As you can see, it changed also here in the instance, but the content stayed there. So this wasn't a breaking change for design. However, if I would, for example, create a new button inside or new label inside with some style, and I would remove the original layer, this would cause a breaking change, because as you can see, the custom label got removed. It's not there. So the way how to prevent a breaking change like this is to not remove any layers and avoid that. The way how to do it is actually to select all these layers one by one and change it to a different style. Let me do this quickly. I forget one here. And this takes more time, of course, for maintenance. But when designers will update their libraries, it won't delete their content. We can also change the minimal width of our medium button, and I have a helper here. Let's say we don't want to have it 60, we want to do it like 48. As you could see, this changed the size here, and it also changed the size because of auto layout here in the default state. If you don't remember how it was before, I can bring my screenshot closer to compare it. It was wider before. Before I will get to deprecating, I would like to show you one technique I really like. I did the screenshots before my changes, and now I can do the same thing after I did the changes. And I don't see the image here, not sure why. Never mind, let's do it quickly like this. But let's do it differently. What I can do is that I can take my original image, I can select the image in the panel, I can click on the blend mode and select a difference as a blend type. What it will do is a nice magic that is called visual regression testing, and then when I will place the snapshot over instances, I can clearly see where things changed. I can see that the width of the buttons changed in some cases, and so on. This is super helpful because this means that even with large variants, we can quickly identify what changed. Let's try to deprecate large size. Like, there are a few ways how we can deprecate large components. What we can do is that we can add, for example, emoji into the name of the variant. So if someone will try to use button later, they can see the emoji here. And if we use consistent emoji all the time, they will see, they will know that this means that is deprecated. We can also add a description to a specific variant. And then this description will appear here, and it will also appear here, which is super useful. But it's not always awesome to have to deprecate only variants, and there is a better way how to actually do this. What I can do is I can take all these components I want to deprecate from my button, I can move them from the main component, and I can create a new variant component from that. I will rename it to button primary large. I will change its name to emoji again. And what is a good thing is that if I search for button primary now, I can see two here. One is this one, and second is with the emoji in the name. If I add also a description there, and search again, descriptions will appear. There's a good thing by splitting into separate component is that I can also add an fill background for the whole frame, for example the red one. So that's just another indicator that will appear, and that will communicate to designers that something is deprecated and they don't need to use this. So there's a problem though. The problem is that with changing things like this, and you saw it when I was changing button, it's a lot of individual clicking. So it can take a lot of time, especially if there is a lot of components to handle. But there is also a bright future. Like there is an awesome plugin that I would like to mention here. It's called Automator, and it's being created by Jordan Singer, and it's basically if you use Photoshop in past, it's basically actions but for Figma. You can define any action. You can say select component, change component style to this style, and so on, and then you can run it in a batch for a lot of components. You may also ask, why not use base components, because this is how base components work, right? Let me get to another demo. What are base components? Base components is when you create an pill. It can be called primitive, it can be called base, and then you will use this base component in all the other variants here. As you can see, all these components are using the pill primitive. So when I change something in the base component, for example, the style of the label, again, you can see that it changed everywhere. This is great for maintainability. However, for usability, when it's used, when I will, for example, enter the component, I can change to some label, and then I want to go up and change its type, and I went up by clicking Shift and Enter. It selects the wrapper component, the base component, instead of the main component. So I need to do it again to actually get to an options of my variant. This is like, if you don't know base components designer, this may be confusing, and you may end up doing things like switching instances directly here. It doesn't load for some reason, but it doesn't matter. Changing instances directly here, which may break your components. There is one more practice that is happening quite a lot with base components, and when it comes to more complex components. The practice is that you will define all the possible states of the component, all the content that can be there, and then you will define a card with some options hidden. So for example, here are all the options, but in this bottom card, all the options are hidden, so they are not visible for users to see. This is great for maintenance because again, you can then change something here, and it will change in all the variants. However, when it's used, it works quite well if you do the variant switching. It works even perfect. The problem is if you ignore this variant switching and you will just remove, for example, this tag style, you will get, you still have the all variant, but you basically got into this state of the data. But then if you as a consumer try to switch something to text, the Figma tries to remember that you hide the layer, and it doesn't display it for you. So the usability for this is quite hard. I put down a few pros and cons for base components, and they are great for centralized definition of component. They are great for easier changes and for themability. However, there is so many cons connected to usability of these components that I would actually recommend not using them for UI kits that are used by someone else than you, or more than 10 designers, because it means that you need to onboard all these designers into the concept of base components. There is one more quick demo I would like to show you, or tip, and that we as maintainers should invest into good canvas organization. That means adding labels, adding dividers, adding structuring things in a consistent manner. What I created for us is that we have this short guideline how to structure things. So we know that states, for example, are always horizontal, sizes are always vertical, and we also put lines in the color in the purple color in between them. So it's well organized. It works for small components, very simple components with all the different labels. It works also for larger components with more variants, with more sizes, or even the huge components with a lot of variants, which I don't recommend, but you can still see that organization kind of helps. You can see how it looks without dividers, and it's just not that fast to navigate through that. So if I show you a few examples from our Productboard UI kit, there is a button primary that is organized the same way with hover states and so on as list option radio, and the same applies for example radio. So it's not just great for me as someone who comes back to this to maintain it, but also to other designers. Let's switch back to 2 slides now, because this will be all from my demos. There is one more nice example I found in a Figma community, and it's from GitHub Primer. What they do is that they set up pages with components examples with all the different variants or all the different combinations, and also like combining different components together. This is great, not just because you can see what broke if you change something, but also if you apply the overlay technique that I showed you, you can identify changes even faster. So let's go to the last part. How might we create UI kits that will be aligned with code? If you remember, I talked about UI kit in Figma and design tokens and in connections in between them. Let's start with design tokens. If you are not aware with the term, design tokens are basically design decisions stored in some token data, and then these decisions can be converted to different tooling, to different technologies like React and so on. In Figma, design tokens are represented as color styles, typography styles, and so on. In React, it may be variables, or they are variables, for example. So what are some tips and tricks for aligning design tokens in Figma and in code? What we do is that we always add a name of the token to Figma style name at the end, and we close it into square brackets. This ensures that every time that developer will select a color from any component, it will show also the token name, the variable name from code to them, so they don't need to search for hex code in some list of tokens and so on. We do this for colors, we do this for style, for effect styles, and it shows basically everywhere. What I also recommend is to try to leverage tooling to keep design tokens in sync automatically. There are a few tools and plugins like Figma tokens or design tokens plugin. They take token definitions from Figma, and they can convert it via tooling into different technologies. There are also like other tools like Supernova, Specify, or Arcade that do the same thing, but some of them can even like write and change styles back in Figma. What about components, though? One thing that is getting a lot of attention in community is aligning component API across different implementations. What does it mean? You have a button primary, blue one with icon, for example, with some sizes, and the name is same in React, and the name is same in Figma. Also, the icon property is same in React and as a Figma variant. Also, the size and the values are same as well. What we can do as an addition is that we can even put, for example, an emoji to a variant name, so developers know which properties are aligned with code and which are not. There are a few nice threads on Twitter. One is from Chris, and second is from Joey. And there is a lot of opinions on how to do these things, and a lot of ideas how to align API between these tools. So I recommend going there and check them. There is also an excellent article from Nathan Curtis, Crafting Component API Together, describing how these components differ, what are the similarities, and how can teams approach creating these component APIs. What I would like to show you now is what's our process at Productboard for bringing component API in Figma closer to what we have in code. The key is in collaboration. We just invite designers, developers together to Figma and to Notion, which are two tools that we use for crafting our component API, and we discuss it there. We usually start with the design in Figma. We have a component, for example, distance indicator, with all its types. It's available to designers in Figma. They can use it. It has all different variants. It has all different states. And we usually collaborate on this together with product designers, so we know how or what they need from a component in our design system. Then we do the process with red lines. Very detailed description of all the visual characteristics, behavior, interactions of the component. The same, basically, it's a part of a handoff process. And this is usually a time where we invite also developers, because we discuss which token could we use, or if there are some accessibility criteria that we should meet. And this is when we start very heavily collaborate on the specification for the component. And the next part is that we bring these red lines and this component specification to a Notion template that we have for crafting a component API. Then we discuss how properties should be named in React, because we use only React, what other properties should be there, and we then share this component API draft also with product teams, or with the, for example, developers who requested the component before, so they can give us their perspectives from mostly from product engineering. There is one last step after we agreed on how the component API should look like, that design system designer will check it and will compare it, how it is in Figma, and update the component in Figma. What is a good thing in Figma is that if you change API of the component, it's not a breaking change. You can rename things, you can regroup things, you can even remove complete properties and variants in the variant panel and replace it with others, but components will still keep synced with instances and other designers' files. There is one last question I would like to answer today, and it's about when not to align API in Figma with code. For me, one big criteria is when it would make component less usable for designers. If there are some like technical specifics, for example in React or best practices, and they don't work well with mindset of designers, I'm trying to not align it, but mention it in descriptions or mention it in some documentation. Also, aligning, like for example, Boolean properties between Figma and the code can lead to a huge amount of permutations in component definitions. This is another thing that I am considering when we discuss what should be aligned and what not. And then there are things that are not effectively doable in Figma. For example, nesting content like in HTML. We have a slots technique for that now. It works somehow, but it's still not super usable for designers. There is one more thing, and it's about states of components, because in code, states are interactive. When you hover something, touch something, click something, but in Figma, states need to be presented as a specific property in API of the component. So what would be the key takeaways from my talk today? Like, I think that we should provide great UI kit experience by preventing breaking changes. And we should do as much as possible to do this, even if it means that the maintainability will be harder for us as maintainers of the UI kit. With this in mind, we should optimize our UI kit for consistency. And when we are working on components and discussing how the component should work, we should co-design component API together with developers, and not just with design system developers, but also include designers and developers from product teams, because they have many different perspectives on how they work with components. So that's all from me. Thank you very much. I hope it was helpful. And if you have any questions, if you would like to add something to my talk, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. My DMs are open. Thank you very much.